All right, so picture this. You've got a mammoth,
Okay.
but it's like the size of a German shepherd.
Wow.
Yeah, like we're going full, honey, I shrunk the mammoth today.
I love it.
We're diving into the world of island mammoths, and specifically the ones found on Wrangel Island off Siberia
Right.
and the Channel Islands,
Oh, cool.
right here off the coast of California.
Awesome.
You sent over some great research
Yeah.
on isolated island populations
Yeah.
and how they lead to some interesting evolutionary changes,
Absolutely.
including something called dwarfism.
It's fascinating to see
Yeah.
how these contained environments can
Yeah.
actually shape
Yeah,
the trajectory of evolution.
totally. So like animals on islands,
Yeah.
they evolved to be smaller
Exactly.
than their mainland counterparts.
For a long time, scientists believed that all island mammoths
Oh, really?
would be tiny,
Okay.
just like the Mediterranean dwarf elephant,
Oh, wow.
Elephas falconeri,
Okay.
much smaller than their mainland relatives.
Yeah. It's like nature's own laboratory, right?
It is.
Watching how evolution plays out
Exactly.
in these contained environments.
Yeah.
But the results aren't always predictable, are they?
No, they're not. And both Wrangel and the Channel Islands
Yeah.
really challenge that initial assumption.
So what's so fascinating is that these two islands are both home to mammoths.
They are
But they tell two very different evolutionary stories.
two very different stories.
So let's journey to the frozen landscape of Wrangel Island first.
Okay.
This island was home to woolly mammoths,
Right.
Mammoths primigenius.
Yeah.
That amazingly survived until about 4,000 years ago.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
That's crazy.
I know.
And then on the sunny shores of the Channel Islands,
Yeah.
we have a lineage of Columbian mammoths,
We do.
Mammoths exilis,
Yes.
that persisted until at least 40,000 years ago.
Release.
So those dates alone suggest we're dealing with two very different timelines.
Yeah, for sure.
Wrangel Island mammoths surviving until practically the dawn of civilization
I know.
versus 40,000 years ago.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. Did that have to do with when each island became isolated?
I think that plays a big role.
Okay.
Wrangel Island became isolated from the mainland around 10,000 years ago,
Okay.
meaning the mammoths there
Yeah.
were cut off
Okay.
for roughly 6,000 years
Wow.
before going extinct.
That's a long time.
It is a long time, but here's the interesting part.
Okay.
During the winters, ice bridges would periodically form,
Oh, really?
connecting Wrangel Island back to the mainland.
So it wasn't a total island prison then?
Not totally.
Oh.
No, and this allowed for what we call gene flow,
Okay.
where mainland mammoths could potentially
Yeah.
cross over
Oh, wow.
and interbreed with the island population.
So they're getting a fresh influx of genes
Exactly.
from their mainland relatives?
That's a little genetic refresh.
Wow. So would that have influenced how they evolved over time?
Absolutely. The Wrangel Island mammoths ranged in size from 180 to 230 centimeters
Okay.
at the shoulder.
That's not exactly pocket size.
Not exactly, no. In fact, they were quite similar inside
Yeah.
to their mainland counterparts,
Interesting.
suggesting that the isolation, even with the periodic breaks,
Yeah.
wasn't long enough to trigger
Okay.
significant dwarfism.
So in a way, those Wrangel Island mammoths,
Yeah.
with their mainland connections,
Yeah.
they essentially stayed true to their roots.
I like that.
Yeah. Did they all stay that size, or were there smaller ones too?
There were some smaller individuals on Wrangel Island,
Really?
and this could be due to a couple of things.
Okay.
It's possible that the smaller mammoths were females.
Oh, interesting.
We often see size differences between males and females in mammal species,
Right.
what we call sexual dimorphism.
Like humans,
Exactly.
different shapes and sizes.
Or it could simply be natural variation within the population.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't expect every single mammoth to be exactly the same size, right?
Right. Okay, so now let's shift our focus to the sunny shores of the Channel Islands
Okay.
and meet the mammoths who called this place home.
Where-
They were isolated for at least 40,000 years,
Wow.
10 times longer.
That's a long time.
Than those on Wrangel Island. Did that prolonged isolation have a more pronounced effect on their evolution?
It certainly did.
Okay.
Mammoths exilis,
Yeah.
as their name suggests,
Okay.
were true dwarfs.
So now we're talking miniature mammoths.
Now we're talking miniature mammoths.
Wow.
Their shoulder heights ranged from a mere 150 to 180 centimeters.
That's quite a difference.
It is quite a difference.
But interestingly, we also find larger mammoth on the Channel Islands,
Yes.
potentially indicating migrations from the mainland,
Right.
even after the initial isolation.
It's possible.
So the Channel Islands had a mix of mammoths,
Looks like it.
the original inhabitants who shrunk over time,
Yeah.
and some newcomers who retained their mainland size.
A real mammoth melting pot.
Right. But if they were coming from the mainland, wouldn't we expect to find dwarf mammoths?
You would think so.
On the California mainland, too.
Yeah.
But we don't.
No, we don't.
So this suggests that the dwarfing was a specific adaptation
Right.
to the unique environment of the Channel Islands.
It seems so.
So this is getting really interesting.
It is.
We've got both islands, similar in size, similar distance from the mainland,
Right.
yet we have these very different mammoth stories.
We
Wow.
do. It all comes down to the length of isolation
Okay.
and that ability to mix genes
Yeah.
with mainland populations.
Okay.
On Wrangel, it was a relatively short
Yeah.
6,000 to 7,000 years,
Okay.
with the possibility of mammoths coming and going
Right.
during those icy winters.
During those icy winters, yeah.
But on the Channel Islands,
Yeah.
it was at least 40,000 years
Wow.
of relative isolation,
Okay.
which promoted more dramatic evolutionary changes.
So time and isolation
Yeah.
were the key ingredients
Yeah, it seems so.
in the recipe for tiny mammoths.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's always more to the story.
There's always more to the story.
Right.
And to really understand these mammoths
Yeah.
and their adaptations,
Yeah.
we have to look at the specifics.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Okay.
What kind of details are we talking about?
Well, for instance,
Yeah.
we can learn a lot from their teeth.
Their teeth.
The analyses reveal
Yeah.
some interesting differences in their diets.
Oh, okay.
The Wrangel Island mammoths. Remember?
Yeah, they had those narrower molars.
Exactly.
And you said that could be an adaptation for a diet of tough branches?
Tough branches, yeah. Did the Channel Island mammoths
Yeah.
have similar teeth?
I don't know, did they?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The Channel Island mammoths actually had varying molar sizes,
Interesting.
suggesting a mixed diet of grasses and bushes.
Oh, so they had a slightly more diverse menu
It seems so.
than their Wrangel Island counterparts.
Possibly.
Different islands.
Yeah.
Different menus, it makes sense.
Makes sense.
What about their bones? Did those tell us anything interesting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Channel Island mammoths, as you might expect,
Yeah.
generally had smaller bones
Right.
than the Wrangel mammoths,
Right.
consistent with their overall smaller size.
So a survival of the smallest in this case.
In this case, yes.
Those smaller moans
Yeah.
also tell a story of adaptation
They do.
to the island environment, right?
Precisely.
Smaller bodies require less food,
Yes.
which can be a significant advantage
Huge advantage.
in a resource-limited environment, island.
Yeah.
So we see these mammoths responding to the constraints
Yeah.
of their island home,
Right.
becoming smaller
Yeah.
and more efficient over time.
Exactly.
What about their tusks?
The tusks.
Yeah, those mighty tusks
Yeah.
must have left some impressive fossils.
I bet.
Did those tell us anything about how they lived?
You're right. Tusks can often be a key indicator of size and behavior.
Okay.
The Wrangel mammoths, with their consistent connection to the mainland,
Yeah.
had tusks comparable in size
Yeah.
to their mainland counterparts.
Okay.
But the Channel Island mammoth tusks
Yeah.
were smaller,
Oh.
which tells us their skulls were smaller too.
So does that mean their tusks didn't serve the same purpose?
It's possible.
Okay.
We know from studying modern elephants
Yeah.
that tusks play a role in everything,
Okay.
from digging for food and water to
Uh-huh.
attracting mates
Yeah.
and competing with rivals.
Oh, wow.
Smaller tusks on the Channel Island mammoths
Yeah.
could point to different social dynamics
Okay.
or even different feeding strategies.
Interesting.
Perhaps there wasn't as much competition
Yeah.
for resources or mates on their island.
So these island mammoths weren't just about shrinking in size.
It seems not.
They were adapting their entire lifestyle
Exactly.
to suit their unique environments.
The whole package.
So it really paints a picture of evolution in action, doesn't it?
It really does.
It brings us to a big question.
Okay.
If both islands had mammoths of varying sizes,
Yeah.
what factors beyond isolation
Right.
determine the ultimate fate
Yeah, that's the question.
of each population? That's the question.
Right, like why did those Wrangel Island mammoths last the Channel Island mammoths
Right.
by thousands of years?
By thousands of years.
Were they just lucky?
Yeah.
Or was there something else going on?
Let's find out.
Let's dive into that next.
Right, okay.
Jerry.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've seen that island life can lead to some fascinating changes, adaptations.
Yeah.
But that mystery of
Yeah.
why the Wrangel Island mammoths
Right.
outlived the Channel Island mammoths
Yeah.
by thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
It's a complex one. It goes beyond simple isolation.
So we've got to consider a
Yeah,
whole bunch of things.
we do.
Environmental changes,
Yeah.
genetic diversity.
Yes, even just plain chance.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the environmental changes.
Okay.
We know that the planet went through some pretty wild climate swings
It did, right?
during the Pleistocene
Yeah.
and Holocene epochs.
Yeah,
Could those have played a role?
absolutely.
Okay.
In the mammoth survival.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Ice ages came
Yeah.
and went. Sea levels rose and fell.
Yeah.
And those fluctuations would have had a direct impact
Right.
on the available resources
Yeah.
and habitats
For sure.
on those islands.
So what might have been like a lush mammoth-friendly paradise
Right.
could have transformed it into a much harsher landscape,
Right.
less hospitable,
No,
putting immense pressure on these populations.
you got it.
So maybe the Channel Islands, because they were isolated for longer,
It's possible.
experienced more drastic environmental changes
It's possible, yeah.
than Wrangel Island changes that made it harder for the mammoths to adapt and survive.
That's a very plausible theory.
Okay.
Islands, due to their limited size
Right.
and resources,
Yeah.
are inherently more vulnerable
Okay.
to environmental changes.
Interesting.
Shifts that might be manageable on a vast continent
Yeah.
could be catastrophic
Okay.
on a small island.
So, like, a change in rainfall patterns
Exactly.
that leads to a decline in the mammoths' preferred food sources.
Right.
On a continent, they might be able to migrate
Yeah.
to find potent grazing.
Find better grazing.
But on an island, their options are limited.
And options are limited.
Okay, so we've got environmental instability as one potential factor.
One potential factor.
What about genetic diversity?
Ah, yes, genetic diversity.
Didn't we say that the Wrangel Island mammoths,
We did.
thanks to those ice bridges,
Yes,
had a bit of an advantage there?
they did. They had that gene flow.
Right.
Genetic diversity is like a species insurance policy
Oh.
against extinction.
Uh.
The more diverse the gene pool,
Yeah.
the greater the chance
Okay.
of having individuals with traits
Right.
that allow them to survive
Yeah.
and reproduce even when faced with challenges
Okay.
like disease,
Okay.
climate change,
Yeah.
or new competition.
So it's like having a larger toolbox.
Exactly.
Right. If one tool doesn't work,
Right.
you got others to try.
You got options.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And in the case of the Wrangel Island mammoths,
Yeah.
that periodic connection to the mainland
Right.
might have given them that genetic boost they
Nice.
needed to weather whatever environmental storms came their way.
Whereas the Channel Island mammoths were stuck with the genetic hand they were dealt.
Kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
when they first became isolated.
Right.
And it's worth noting that we're still piecing together
Yeah.
the genetic histories
Mm-hmm.
of these mammoth populations.
Yeah.
Ancient DNA analysis
Yeah.
is a powerful tool. Can reveal a lot about a species' past,
Right.
but finding well-preserved DNA from fossils
Yeah.
can be tricky.
It's like searching for a perfectly intact page
It is.
in a book that's thousands of years old.
That's a great way to put
It's
it.
a rare find.
It is a rare find, but as technology improves,
Right.
we're getting better
Okay.
at extracting and analyzing ancient DNA.
That's great.
So hopefully we'll have a clearer picture
Yeah.
of the genetic diversity of
Okay.
these mammoth populations soon.
So even with the limited information we have,
Yeah.
it's clear that genetic diversity
Yeah.
likely played a role
It did.
in their survival
Oh,
or
no.
extinction.
Or extinction.
Okay, so we've talked about environmental change,
We have.
genetic diversity.
Yes.
But you also mentioned the role of pure chance.
Right.
How could that factor in?
Well, you're right. We can't discount the role of luck,
Yeah.
especially when dealing with
Right.
isolated populations.
Yeah.
Think about it. A particularly brutal winter,
Yeah.
a volcanic eruption,
Right.
a wildfire,
Uh-huh.
or even a disease outbreak
Oh, wow.
could have devastating consequences
Yeah.
for a small population.
Okay.
It's like rolling the dice.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get lucky,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't.
So maybe the Channel Island mammoths just rolled
It's possible.
few bad dice in a row.
It's possible.
Yeah.
We may never know
Right.
the
Yeah.
exact sequence of events
Yeah.
that led to their extinction.
Right.
But it's highly likely that a combination of factors,
Okay.
including bad luck, contributed to their demise.
So it seems like this complex interplay
It is.
of environmental pressures,
Uh-huh.
genetic limitations,
Yeah.
and a dash of good or bad fortune.
A little bit of luck.
Yeah, it wasn't just about being on an island, it was
Well,
about navigating
yeah.
a whole web of factors
Exactly.
that determined their ultimate fate.
That's what makes paleontology
Right.
and evolutionary biology so intriguing.
We're like detectives trying to solve a mystery
Right.
with only a handful of clues.
Yeah, we're piecing together the past
We are.
based on
Yes.
fragmented evidence.
Fragmented evidence.
And it's a constant process
It is.
of discovery and revision,
Absolutely.
like solving a puzzle
Yeah.
where new pieces keep emerging
Uh-huh.
and you have to rearrange everything to fit them in.
You got it.
And that's why the story of island mammoths
Yeah.
continues to fascinate researchers.
It does.
Each new fossil, each new genetic analysis,
Uh-huh.
each new discovery adds another layer
That's another layer.
to our understanding of these amazing creatures
Yeah.
and the factors that determine their survival or extinction.
Isn't that a never-ending story?
It is. It makes you wonder,
It does.
what other secrets
I know.
are hidden
Right.
in the fossil record,
Yeah.
just waiting to be unearthed
Uh-huh.
and deciphered?
It is an exciting thought.
It is.
The past is brimming with mysteries. Yeah. And as we delve deeper,
Yeah,
we gain a richer understanding,
we do.
not only of these ancient creatures,
Right.
but also of our own place
Uh,
in this vast tapestry
yeah,
of life on Earth.
I love that.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you.
Speaking of gaining a deeper understanding,
Okay.
what can we as humans
Right.
living in the 21st century
Yeah.
learn from the story of these island mammoths?
Yeah, why should we care?
Right. Why should we care about these long extinct giants?
It's a great question. It really gets to the heart
Yeah.
of why we study the past.
Okay.
The story of island mammoths
Yeah.
is a powerful reminder of the forces of evolution
Okay.
and the interconnectedness of life on Earth.
Okay. I'm all ears. Break that down for me.
All right, so first of all,
Yeah.
it shows us that evolution isn't
Okay.
a straight line,
Okay.
a predictable path.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic dance between organisms
Okay.
and their environments,
Okay.
full of unexpected twists and turns.
So it's not just survival of the fittest.
No.
It's survival of the most adaptable.
The most adaptable.
Okay.
And that adaptability hinges on
Yeah.
genetic diversity,
Okay.
which, as we've seen,
Right.
can be a crucial factor
Yeah.
in navigating changing world.
So the Wrangel Island mammoths, with their periodic gene flow from the mainland,
Right.
might have had an edge over their Channel Island cousins
Possibly.
in that regard.
Yeah. And it also highlights the vulnerability
Yeah.
of isolated populations.
Okay.
When you're cut off
Yeah.
from the larger gene pool,
Right.
your options for adapting to challenges
Yeah.
become more limited.
It's like playing a card game with a smaller deck.
That's a great way to put it.
You have fewer choices.
Fewer choices,
Higher stakes.
higher stakes.
Right. And that brings us to the interconnectedness of life.
Yes.
Right? The fate of those island mammoths
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just determined by their own biology.
Right.
It was also shaped by the environment around them.
The environment.
The climate, the availability of resources,
Mm-hmm.
and even the presence or absence
Yes.
of other species.
It's a web. It's all connected.
It's a stark reminder that we're all part of this intricate web of life.
We are.
And even subtle changes can
Yeah.
have ripple effects
Absolutely.
throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah. And while mammoths might be long gone,
Right.
the lessons we learned from their story
Okay.
are remarkably relevant for us today
Okay.
in a world facing climate change,
Right.
habitat loss,
Yeah.
and the ongoing decline of biodiversity.
Right.
Understanding how species adapt
Yeah.
and evolve is more crucial than ever.
So the mammoths are both
Yeah.
a cautionary tale
Mm-hmm.
and a source of inspiration.
Exactly.
They remind us that change is inevitable,
It is.
but adaptation is possible.
It is.
And by studying the past, we can glean insights that
Right.
might help us navigate the challenges of the
Yes.
present and the future.
I love that.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I have to ask about those dwarfed mammoths
Okay.
on the Channel Islands. Were they simply an evolutionary dead end,
Right.
or were they a successful adaptation for a unique environment?
That is a fantastic question.
Ooh, controversy. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, on the one hand, you could argue
Okay.
that their Extinction
Yeah.
suggests that dwarfism in this case
Okay.
was not a sustainable long-term strategy.
Well, okay.
Perhaps they became too specialized,
Yeah.
too dependent on specific resources that ultimately disappeared.
So like a perfectly tuned race car.
Exactly.
That's incredible on a smooth track,
Yeah,
but can't handle a bumpy road.
that's a great analogy. But
Right.
on the other hand, you
Yeah.
could also argue
Okay.
that they were tremendously successful.
Okay.
They survived for at least 40,000 years on those islands,
Right.
adapting to limited resources,
Okay.
carving out a niche for themselves.
So maybe they were more like a rugged off-road vehicle.
You got it.
Right. Built to thrive
Built to thrive.
in their challenging island terrain.
Exactly.
And perhaps their extinction wasn't due to
Right.
some inherent flaw in their dwarfism,
Yeah,
but rather a consequence of external factors,
possibly.
like those environmental changes or chance events we discussed earlier.
It's possible.
So the jury's still out on whether
The jury's still out.
they were a success story or a cautionary tale.
That's the beauty of science.
I know.
There's always more to learn,
Yeah.
more to discover, and more to debate.
I love that. And speaking of more to learn,
Okay.
I'm curious about other animals
Okay.
that have adapted to island life.
Yeah.
Are there any other cool examples of island dwarfism?
Oh, yeah.
Or for that matter, gigantism out there?
Oh, absolutely. The natural world is just full of these captivating instances of island evolution, like the Komodo dragon,
Oh, yeah.
the largest living lizard on Earth.
Huge.
I know, right? Yeah.
Found only on a handful of islands in Indonesia.
Did they get that big because of island life?
It's likely. Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive, especially when we've been talking about shrinking mammoths.
I know, it's kind of the opposite, right?
Right.
But remember, on islands, the rules of the game
Yeah.
can be quite different
Right.
with fewer predators
Yeah.
and a different mix of prey.
Right.
Larger size can become a huge advantage.
So instead of shrinking to conserve resources, they supersize
He's super sound.
to rule their island domain.
It really underscores the amazing diversity
Yeah.
of evolutionary pathways.
So islands are like natural laboratories
They are.
where unique selection pressures
Yeah.
lead to this fascinating array of adaptations.
We see dwarfism in other species besides mammoths, too.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, there are dwarf hippos in Madagascar,
Okay.
dwarf deer in Indonesia,
Wow.
even dwarf crocodiles in the Philippines.
It's like a lost world
It is.
of miniature and giant creatures.
It's amazing. It really makes you wonder what would happen.
What do you think?
If humans evolved on an isolated island, would we be tiny or towering giants?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's impossible to say for sure,
Right.
but it highlights how much our own evolutionary journey
Yeah.
has been shaped by the environments we inhabit.
That's so cool. Speaking of evolutionary journeys,
Yeah.
this has been an awesome deep dive
Has been.
into the world of island mammoths
Yes.
and the broader phenomenon of island evolution.
Absolutely.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective
I'm glad.
on the power of isolation
Yeah.
to drive change.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is. And I hope this conversation has sparked a curiosity in our listeners
Me too.
to continue exploring the wonders of paleontology
Absolutely.
and the stories that fossils can tell us
Yeah.
about the history of life on Earth.
I love it.
And for our listeners who are just as fascinated by island evolution as we are,
Yes.
we have a treasure trove of resources in our show notes,
We do.
including links to those amazing research articles you shared
Ah.
and information about Komodo dragons,
Yeah.
dwarf hippos,
Uh-huh.
and other remarkable island creatures.
There's so much out there
There is.
to explore, and the story of evolution,
Yeah,
it's still being written.
that's true.
New discoveries are being made all the time,
All the time.
which means there's always something new to learn
Absolutely.
and ponder.
This has been a truly fascinating dip dive.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining me today
Thank you for having me.
and sharing your expertise.
I always enjoy these conversations.
Me too. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.
Yes. Thank you.
Until next time, keep exploring,
Keep exploring.
keep questioning,
Keep questioning.
and never lose that sense of wonder
Never.
about the natural world and the mysteries it holds.
So many mysteries.